Good morning, everyone. This particular song, first of all, it was sung so beautifully. My goodness, yeah. Thank you, Prakash. It is so moving. It's such a beautiful song. I have a whole talk on this song, which, if I'd known, I could have given it today. This is a song that became the favorite song, we could say, of Sri Ramakrishna, which he didn't know. Probably the first time he heard it was when, I think, Trailokya Sanyal, the Brahmo Samaj. It's part of their songbook. He sang, and then after that, Narendra sang it. And towards the end of his life, whenever Narendra would sing any song, he would say, "Now sing that one." Yeah. And that he meant this particular song. So it really became his favorite song. It sums up beautifully this devotional attitude that fits in with, we can say, with the Advaita Vedanta, this idea. The Sufi idea, really. The Zafar was the last Mughal emperor of India, and very liberal, of course. Very similar to Kabir and other things songs that we hear. Badrasa Zafar, yeah. The topic today is something similar, so it'll fit in nicely, I hope. Preparing the heart for devotion. And I have to confess that I gave it not too long ago, but I have a kind of sense of gratitude that my words don't leave a very deep impression on people, and they generally forget what I say. So that's why I can repeat myself so often. You also forgot. Yeah, I also forgot. No. Yeah. So, in any event, a few years ago, I was engrossed in reading a book of recorded talks by Swami Bhuteshanandaji Maharaj. Swami Bhuteshanandaji was the 12th president of the Ramakrishna order. I was very fortunate. I had my brahmacharya vows and my sannyasa vows from him. He was a unique combination of, the most important thing was sweetness and simplicity and kindness and everything. And at the same time was a tremendous scholar. And at the same time, especially when he was younger, filled with the spirit of renunciation. He spent a long time in Uttarkashi and making his food and everything. He had a unique, really, gift of speaking in such a way that they recorded his words, and usually there was no editing that was needed at all. They would just take down exactly what he said, and to know us and us, and we always add little things. They're not good sentences and everything, but he had that knack. So one of the talks that was recorded in this book, actually the book is called Sri Ramakrishna Bhavo Prabha, and it's in Bengali, but there's a companion book in English, which is not exactly all of the same lectures, but most of the same, and that one was called what was that one called? We have it here also. Uniqueness of the Ramakrishna Incarnation and Other Essays. So I don't know if we have it available now, but we can get it. Anyhow, these are very beautiful talks that he gave. He never wrote anything, really. Either these were talks that he gave, or he gave many classes also. He gave a series of talks in Japan on the Naradiya Bhakti Sutra that have been translated. It's also very, very, very nice. Anyhow, there was one particular talk that is called Shuddha Bhaktir Lokhon Utar Praptir Upai. And the English title is Supreme Devotion and the Way to Attain It. I kind of shortened everything into preparing the heart for devotion. So this really, the whole thing can be summed up in one of the phrases that we hear Sri Ramakrishna use quite often, that the path of devotion is a simple path, Shohoj path. And then he would add, but not that simple. So this is kind of the theme. Simple for various reasons, but we shouldn't think that there's no effort that has to be done, that there's no preparation that has to be done. And we'll see that Swami Premananda gives a very high bar here. If we really want to be fit, this adhikara fit to follow this path of devotion, then a tremendous amount of purity of heart and other things will go into it. So this first part is the encouraging part. That everybody, it's open to everybody. That it is a straight and simple path. Main reason is that it involves relationships. We have a relationship with our loved ones that we are all familiar with. We can transpose this into that relationship with God. This is that idea of having a relationship with God. One of the things that Sri Ramakrishna emphasized so much, that we know what it's like to feel the love that the mother feels for us when we're young. So we can take that feeling of love towards the mother and think of mother as God, as a divine mother, or any of the human relationships. So that way it's something very natural to us. The path of knowledge, we have to start out at the very beginning with a very unnatural idea. I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not this personality, I'm not this ego, I'm one with Brahman. Very difficult. We're starting out with an idea that is the final goal. The path of devotion, we can take everything at face value. That yes, I'm a child of God, I'm a devotee of God, servant of God, and gradually, as we get closer and closer, that cord of love brings us closer and closer, and we start to feel God dwelling within our own heart, and then we can experience oneness. So it's a gradual path that we take, whereas the path of knowledge, really, we start at the end. We at the very beginning, we make no compromises, and it requires a tremendous amount of renunciation and dispassion and non-identification with the body. Thakur says so many times, "Ato priyojanish," this body which is so dear to us that we have to completely forget about this feeling that this is an important aspect of me, who I am. That this is something that has to be completely absent for those who want to follow this path of knowledge. So the path of devotion, from that point of view, is relatively simple. And Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, all we have to do, if we can weep for God, sometimes he says, just for 24 hours, if we can repeat his name constantly, her name constantly, and do a little puja, practice surrender and other things like that, that'll be enough. So this is that first part that is very simple, straightforward, natural. Sahoj means natural also, simple and natural. But the second part of this, that ato sahoj noi, but it's not so simple. This is the part that will be emphasized a little bit here, that we really have to do this preparation, prastuti. Now, I want to make a distinction between something that's called adhikara and this idea of prastuti. Adhikara means who has a right to practice this path of devotion or spiritual life. Who has a right to do it? And with regard to the path of knowledge, then this is a little bit restricted because of the same idea of our attachments and everything. So not everyone is considered qualified to follow this path of knowledge because of attachments and because of this false identification with the body and all sorts of other things. Whereas this path of devotion, everyone can be considered adhikari. Everyone can be considered someone for whom the path of devotion is open. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to do anything. It just means that this is something that no one is debarred from. Now, this adhikara doctrine, it had its orthodox side to it in the early Vedic period, that only Brahmin boys were qualified to study and receive sacred thread and Gayatri and read the Upanishads and everything. But for Sri Ramakrishna, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that according to our own nature and quality, swabhava and everything, one path will be more suited for us. That's all. So this is this idea of adhikara. Now, when we get to the path of devotion, there was never any restriction. Those who, and in fact, really, if we look at the literature, sacred literature of the Vedantic tradition, that almost everything outside of the Upanishads, that means in Gita and the Puranas and Itihasa, were created specifically for those who had no access to the Upanishads. And Mahabharata and everything, there's some very beautiful verses that all of the teachings of the Upanishads have been put in a very simple form so that those who are debarred from study of the Upanishads, Shruti, in the old days, they would have the same access to these teachings, and that means that everyone has the door open to them for final liberation and enlightenment. Because as I say, in the early days, if one could not hear these truths of the Upanishads from the lips of the Guru, then they wouldn't be able to get the moksha that way. So the path of devotion traditionally was meant for everyone. And we find that there's no distinction, and all of the devotional paths, no distinction among caste or among anything else, men or women. Everyone equally has that same right to follow this path. Even those who are very wicked people, of course, they have to change. They have to change, but they have that right. The very nice verse from Gita, Api ched sudaracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhur eva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisaha. Even if the vilest sinner worships me with exclusive devotion. So a vilest sinner means somebody who did things in the past. If they're going to follow all of this, it means that they've made a resolve. They're to be considered righteous, for they have made taken a resolution, this proper resolve to change. So we shouldn't say, oh, I'm a terrible sinner. Thakur hated that. People would say, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner. What can I do? How can I make progress in spiritual life? He said, no, you keep repeating that, and then you'll convince yourself that you really are a sinner. I say that I'm a child of the Divine Mother, I've taken the name of God, how can I be considered a sinner anymore? So this path of devotion is very beautiful in that way. So open to everyone. This is adhikara. Now, the other side of the equation is what we call prastuti. So it may be open to everybody, but are we prepared? See, we're allowed to do it, but are we prepared to do it, to follow this path of devotion? I'll explain this distinction with an example. That many people here live in senior citizen communities, many in Leisure World and other places. In Leisure World, I know that if anybody wants to have a plot of land, there's kind of a community garden, right? If they want to have a plot of land and have their own little garden, it's open to everybody. I think a very small fee, $10 a month or something like that. So it's open to everybody. Everybody can have it. But unless they cultivate the land, unless they remove the weeds and the stones and everything, if they just put some seeds in, they won't get a good crop. That's prastuti. So everyone has the same right to it, but if we want to have a good crop, then we have to do something. We have to prepare the soil. We have to add some fertilizer. We have to get rid of all the rocks and stones and pull all the weeds and everything, and then plant everything. So this is the emphasis on this talk, this idea, prastuti, preparation. Sri Ramakrishna, he gives a nice illustration. Very often his illustrations were taken from songs, or he would say something that would lead into a song. This is that story of Podo. He says, there lived in a village a young man named Padmalochan. People used to call him Podo for short. In this village, there was a temple in a very dilapidated condition. It contained no image of God. Ashwatha and other plants sprang up on the ruins of its walls. Bats lived inside, and the floor was covered with dust and droppings of the bats. The people of the village had stopped visiting the temple. One day after dusk, the villagers heard the sound of a conch shell from the direction of the temple. They thought perhaps someone had installed an image in the shrine and was performing the evening worship. One of them softly opened the door and saw Padmalochan standing in a corner, blowing the conch. No image had been set up, the temple hadn't been swept or washed, and filth and dirt lay everywhere. Then he shouted to Podo, "You have set up no image here within the shrine, O fool! Blowing the conch, you simply make confusion, worse confounded. Day and night, 11 bats scream there incessantly. O Podo, you have no image of Madhava in your temple. And behold, you have not even taken the trouble of cleansing and purifying the temple. Day and night, the 11 bats screech there." And then afterwards, Sri Ramakrishna explains, 11 bats are the 5 organs of action, the 5 organs of perception, and the mind. So these are the things that have to be purified. So purification of the heart. Of course, if we want to install the image of God within the heart, it has to be cleansed. It has to be purified. So this process of purification, this making ourselves fit for this path of devotion, is quite a task. I mean, if we're content to just lead a devotional life, that's fine. But if we're talking about really experience the higher states of devotion, then it's something very, very, very special, this path of devotion. If we look at the life of Swami Premananda, his name suggests he was the image of love. And he liked this path of devotion and everything. He was a highly devotional man. He liked puja and worship and things like that. He was a little skeptical about some of the things that were instituted by Swamiji with regard to the social service work and lecturing and things like that. He was one of the initial skeptics, we can say, among the direct disciples. Not that he lost faith in Swamiji, but he said, no, we're not used to these things. We didn't hear Sri Ramakrishna talking about these. So he had a little bit of reservation, we can say, about that. Then, later, yeah, okay, people, so he said, okay, what would you like in return? And he said, grant me the boon that I won't live long enough to see the death of any of my children. So he said, okay. So the Swami Premananda, people said, it looks like your life is coming to an end, and he said, no, I'll survive this illness. My mother is still alive. He had that faith in her. So anyhow, while he was sick, he read the all available writings of Swami Vivekananda, and he said that it caused a revolution in his mind. So that now he really, all he spoke about was this idea of worship of God in man, and doing this, looking upon God as Shiva dwelling within, and worship. So he spoke about this everywhere. Now, he went to Malda one time, and Holy Mother didn't want him to go. He was just recovering from his illness, but somehow she gave permission. He went there. I know about this because when I was in Malta, they took me to the house where he stayed. So I feel some connection with all of this. Anyhow, so he spoke about this topic about, we can say karma yoga, but it really means this, the worship of the living God. So somebody said, we want to hear about divine love. We want to hear about prema. So then he got very serious. And he said, you want to hear about prema? Then he says, there was once a hawker selling prema on the street by going from door to door. Who will purchase divine love? Who will purchase divine love? Some of the people came out of their houses and said, I'll take it. What is the price? Then the wandering salesman said, you will have to give your head. Who is ready to give his head in exchange for divine love? That day he did not sell even an ounce of divine love. No one was willing to pay the price of their own head. That means to really devote the whole life to God in exchange for prema. So this is not to scare us and think that, oh, okay, there's no hope for us at all, but just for us to understand that real love of God means almost to the exclusion of everything else. But this is the nice thing about the path of devotion, that this preparation goes on. It's not like we have to pull every weed in the beginning. We just have to do enough to start, and then our spiritual practice will also help with this purification. So let me start with the first piece of advice that we get from Swami Swahananda. He says, Aikantikata. This is ekantaka. This means that one-pointedness, that really our whole heart is given to God, whatever aspect of God that we have. Sarvanta karane. So with all of the depth of our feeling that we have to do this. Ananyamana. Not allowing the mind to go anywhere else, that this is how we have to, when we sit down to meditate, reflect on God, it should be done that way. The whole mind absorbed in God, literally having one end in view, eka anta. And with all our heart and soul, allowing no other thought to enter the mind. So this is how we should feel when we sit in meditation at that time, or at least make the attempt to do it. Not that these other thoughts come and disturb anything. Then he quotes a very famous verse from Gita 9:22, Ananyas chintayantu mam, those who think of me, worship me without allowing any other thought to enter their minds, then yoga kshema vahamyaham, I take care of all of their needs. They don't have to worry about anything. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he warns us a little bit that we shouldn't think that we're devotees, that nothing bad will happen to us, and that we don't have to do anything, that God will look after us. He says that this applies to those who are mad with love of God. We just read this recently, mad with love of God. For them, they don't have to worry, everything will be taken care of. You know that story, Thakur tells, that there was one devotee so lost in repeating the name of God that he was unaware where he was walking, and he ended up walking over the clothes that were being dried on the ground. That he's walking on the clothes and getting everything dirty. So the washerman is furious with him, and he runs after him, and he's about to smash him. And so the whole time his mind is thinking of Narayana. So Narayana is looking down, and he says to Lakshmi that I'll be back in a minute. My great devotee, the whole mind is absorbed in me. He's in big trouble. So he leaves, but he comes back very quickly. So then Lakshmi says, what happened? And he says, yeah, before I could get there, he himself picked up a brick and threw it at him. Yeah. So we can't be absorbed that way in God to the point, yeah, that it has to be fully and completely. So, but the point is that it's, as far as possible, that we have to have this desire, at least, to fully give ourselves with all of our heart, to give ourselves to this spiritual life and spiritual practice and everything. So we need this tremendous desire to be a real bhakta. And again in Gita, we see so many of these phrases, manmana, that mad bhakta, give your mind wholly to me, mat parayana, mat para, that look upon me as the supreme, as the only object worthy in life. These are very high ideals. We can't do these things completely. An ideal means something we aspire to. We shouldn't think that if we don't follow these things 100%, that we're wasting our time. Everything is a question of degree. And even Thakur says, in the beginning, hold on to God with one hand, hold on to the world with the other hand. Then, because we hold obligations and we have loved ones in the world and everything, or see God in everyone. But anyhow, this is, we're getting, as I say, a very high standard here. Is the very highest type of ideal that we have. So he says, Swami Premananda, that this idea of surrender and acceptance, first of all, he says most people begin their spiritual life by asking for things, praying to God for some, they may not be selfish things, for health or for the loved ones and everything. And he says because we don't have that faith that God will provide everything for us. But then again, we have this very high standard. We have to be completely absorbed in God. And sincerity. Everything goes down to this idea of sincerity. When I went to India, one of my actually second trip to India, this was in 1973, and I went to Almora. See, this is when I knew very little about the order, and I had a desire to go to Mayavati, and I had no idea where it was, but I saw it was an Almora district, so I went to the town of Almora. And of course, nobody knew. I didn't know where Mayavati was. Anyhow, and I didn't even know we had an ashram in Almora. I stayed in some small little place. But there was something called the Ramakrishna Dham. Very people have ever heard of this place. There was an old American monk there. Did you ever hear of this place? His name was Mangal Chaitanya. He was a monk of our order who never took sannyasa, but spent his whole life in India. A very interesting man. And you couldn't tell, he spoke perfect in Hindi and had a thick Indian accent when he spoke English and everything. But I became friendly with him. He was a very nice man. But I remember that one thing he said over and over and over again was, first you have to be sincere. And what happened with him, in those days, many were sent to Almora who were a little bit exhausted from too much work and they needed some rest. It was a hill station, the weather was good and everything. But he was there to do his intense austerity. He was a little bit proud. So he was a little disillusioned that everyone was not like him, too much pride. So he became independent and started his own place, Ramakrishna Dham, and spent his whole life there. So, but I always remember that, how we emphasize this idea of sincerity. Antarikota, we have this is a Bengali word, it means from the heart, antar, that deep within the heart, that we have to really feel something from the very core of our being, to call on God with our heart and soul. So this first idea, sincerity, then Swami Premananda mentioned faith, devotion, and surrender. Now, surrender, it means that we're content with whatever comes to us after we put forth some effort. At least minimum amount of effort. The degree to which we've attained a higher state of spirituality, it's those who really have reached a very high state, they won't make much of an effort for anything. But for most of us, that we try to do our best. We put forth a good effort. Then we accept whatever comes. So this is that idea of surrender. It doesn't mean that we don't make an effort. We can attain to a real state of sharanagati, of surrender, without self-effort. We have that very instructive illustration of the bird that falls asleep on the mast of the ship. Unless the bird flies in every direction, the bird won't be able to say, yes, wherever the ship takes me, I'll be content. It has to put forth that effort and then realize that our ability to do things on our own is quite limited. And we have to practice ultimately this idea of surrender. So he mentions these three. Then he says purity of heart. Now, purity of heart, of course, we all know from that earlier illustration that the field has to be purified, the heart has to be pure. But again, if we think that we're not qualified to do meditation and prayer and japa because our heart is not pure, then it's a non-starter. Then what do we do in spiritual life? What is the best way to purify the heart? To do our prayer, to do our japa, to do our meditation. We get everything mixed up and backwards. There's a very nice verse that Swami Premananda used to recite, that don't be like the fool who's waiting for the waves to subside in the ocean before going for a bath. He said, don't say that I'll call on God when everything in life is smooth and easy, no more problems and everything. It's like that fool who's standing on the shore of the ocean waiting for the waves to subside. So we have to begin. That's the main thing. And we have to strive for this purity of heart. And the best way to do it is through this spiritual practice. We have another illustration that Sri Ramakrishna gives, that there was a king, and it's a small, humble kingdom. In India, there were so many little kingdoms. It doesn't mean very wealthy or anything like that. And he had a desire to see how a typical subject of his kingdom lived. So the minister said, okay, we'll find a good household for you, a family for you to visit, but give us a little time, and we want to make sure that you can be received properly and everything. So they went to the house of one family, and they said that you'll be receiving a very special guest before too long, that give us a little time, we'll help you clean the house and make sure everything is spick and span, and then we'll buy some nice tea set for you and the furniture and everything so that you can receive the guest nicely. So this is, we can say, that first instance of grace. Some grace comes that this family, they feel that, whoa, something special is happening, and now some incentive to purify everything. Then the king comes, and then they're overjoyed, and the king can come because everything is prepared. And what are these are the tea set? What are the things that have been given to the house? These will be all these spiritual qualities. These will be love and devotion and viveka, vairagya, sharanagati, all of the things that are necessary in order for us to welcome the king into the house. Now, we may say, God already dwells within. This is true. This is true. But for us to realize it and to feel that this is a proper place to meditate on God within the heart, we have to feel a little bit this idea of purification, that has to take place. So clean and spotless. This means we have to practice a little bit of truthfulness and lack of all the passions, pride and anger and greed, lust, all of the things we know. And these are things that, aside from our spiritual practice, we just have to make a resolve with many of these things, that we won't engage in them, and we'll there be any result? It's some result, of course, but Thakur gives that illustration, bringing water to the field. If there are holes in the canals, in the channel, then the water will leak out, and it'll all be gone before it gets to the field. Or like the person who's, the drunkards who were rowing their boat at night, and trying to get to the other side, and when they wake up in the morning, they say they haven't moved anywhere because no one lifted the anchor. So now, in our case, some water will get to the field. There's no question about that. But the extent to which we can clog up those holes, the extent to which that we can eliminate these impurities, that will increase, of course, how much of it reaches the heart. So how to block these holes? Swami Premananda says, we can do this by purifying the mind, by performing only good deeds. So this really, we have to monitor our behavior. We can't go about leading deceitful lives and everything and just saying, I'm not attached. So performing only good deeds, avoiding overindulgence in sense pleasures, and trying to concentrate the mind on God. Trying to concentrate the mind on God. The real preparation is hearing and thinking about God with great concentration. So, sadhana. This is true in every spiritual path, that we have to do our spiritual practice. We can't use that excuse that the heart is not pure, I have too many bad tendencies and everything, that won't do much good. Sadhana is the way that we do perform this purification. Chaitanya Deva, he composed a very beautiful hymn. You know, he was a great Sanskrit Pandit when he was young, and then after his transformation, he completely renounced his scholarship and everything, and as far as we know, he only wrote one hymn. And this is a hymn that in all of our different monasteries and convents of Southern California, it's repeated every morning. So I know this very well. Of course, the English translation. The English translation was done by Christopher Isherwood and Swami Premananda. And there's, Yeah. So there's one line, this Taranadapi Sunichena, this is the most famous line from it. Tarorapi Sahishnuna, Amanina Mananena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. And the English translation that we get, be humbler than a blade of grass, be patient and forbearing like the tree, give honor to all, take honor from none, chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. Now, it's a very nice translation, but there's another element to this verse, that this kirtaniya means that who is really qualified to chant the name of God? It really, this goes back to this idea of preparation and this idea of qualification. Who is really qualified to chant the name of God continually? And then we get these three things. That one with humility. So this humility is the number one thing. Then patience and forbearance. So humility and then patience. And then give honor to everybody, but don't care what people say about ourselves. So all of these things taken together are considered the prerequisite by Chaitanya Deva for really being qualified. Now, again, everybody is qualified, but if we really want to feel that we've done the preparation so that there's no question about anything in our minds, there's no deceitfulness or anything, then these are the three or four things that are emphasized. They're very, very important. So all of these go back to Shraddha. All of these are elements of Shraddha. This sincerity, this humility, this great faith in the tradition, faith in God, faith in the words of the Guru. All of these things are really contained in this one idea of Shraddha. Now, really the last thing that we'll get to is a little bit of an unusual piece of advice. It's unusual in the sense that we might not guess that this would be one of the important things. That Swami Premananda, he says that selfishness is the main obstacle in attaining real devotion. Selfishness. Now, we may think that, no, these are the lust and greed and pride and anger, but he says specifically that selfishness. He says we won't be able to love God until we become unselfish. This may not be possible in the beginning, but as we progress, we can become more and more unselfish. Devotion and selfishness are like light and darkness. They can never go together. Now, why is that? For one thing, selfishness is based on a completely wrong understanding of our own nature. It's really based on all of these ideas of false identification and feeding the ego and wanting to have enjoyment, wanting to have name and fame and all of these other things. So this unselfishness, this will also free us from this pride and anger and all of these other passions that we have to deal with. Now I want to go back to just one initial idea. If we remember the title of this, the title had two parts. One was this, what are the qualities of pure devotion? And the second, what are the means of obtaining it? Now, why these two things together? Because the characteristics of pure devotion are the means of attaining devotion. This is what Swamiji said, make the means and the ends one. This is why when we read Stita Prajna section of Gita, or this Gunatita section, or chapter 12, who is the real devotee, that it's not for us to stand in awe of these great souls, the Stita Prajna, who have these qualities. It's for us to practice them. Now, how do we practice them? This is another great teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. Adopkara, he uses this term. Somehow assimilate them, superimpose them, try to imagine ourselves as if we were a Stita Prajna. How would we act if we were a Stita Prajna? That this way we try to incorporate them into our personality until they become one with our real nature. So the examples that we get are extremely important. They tell us what is the ideal. How do we mold ourselves into that ideal? And to me, one of the most important sections we have in Gita is this chapter 12. Chapter 12, this path of devotion, that is a very important chapter. It starts out with this distinction between the two different paths. Who is qualified for the path of knowledge, who is qualified for the path of devotion. And then there's that middle section about the different types of spiritual practice. If we can't do this or that, then finally everything comes from this idea of surrender. Then we get a description. We get this description, and I won't go into any detail, but I want to at least read it. And I would suggest, if you get some time, go through this. This is chapter 12, verses 13 to 20, to the end of the chapter. It's very, very important that here we have a blueprint, a guideline for how, if we want to become real devotees, then how can we mold our lives according to these ideals? So it starts out, be friendly and compassionate to all. So there's number one thing. Then, be free from this feeling of I and mine. So again, this unselfishness, nothing really belongs to me. Everything belongs to God for the devotee. Then, be the same in pain and pleasure, forbearing, ever content, with the mind fixed on God. Then, don't let the world disturb you, and don't be a disturbance to the world. It's a very beautiful idea. If we can live like that, no one can say, oh, you cause so much trouble to me. And no matter what anybody says to us or does to us, mind won't be disturbed. See, these are all things we associate with the jnani and the Stita Prajna. This is the very interesting aspect of this, that there's nothing in this section about singing and dancing and weeping and crying for God. is all about these qualities of the Stita Prajna, that even for the devotee also has to have these, all the characteristics of the Stita Prajna. Be independent, pure, detached, have no great ups and downs, no tremendous rejoicing and no tremendous sorrow, anything, be kind of even-keeled. Neither rejoicing, nor hating, nor grieving, nor longing for enjoyment. The same to friend and foe. See, these are things that something with, I'm a devotee of God, I care for God. Why bother me with all of these things? I have to be nice to everybody. Yeah, this is part of the package. Same to friend and foe. Same in honor and dishonor, cold and heat, praise and blame. Content with what comes of its own. See, these are all for the jnani and the bhakti equally. That if really our goal is God, then what do we care if we have the biggest position and we get the biggest prize or anything like that? It doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to these things, but whatever comes, we're content. This contentment, Holy Mother says, this is the greatest treasure in life. The greatest treasure in life, she says, contentment. And then, a willingness to follow these teachings in our lives with humility and faith, and look upon the spiritual goal as the one goal of life. So these are the main ideas. This idea of preparing the heart, preparing the heart so that all of these spiritual practices will really bear fruit. If we don't do it, yeah, of course we'll get something. We have some fruit trees out there. Yeah, we get a little bit of something. They're not very good fruit or anything because we don't fertilize it and we don't water them enough and everything. If we want a really good crop, then we have to do something. So what we need is the sincerity, humility, faith, all of these things that we know as Shraddha, and a sincere desire to lead a spiritual life. This sincerity takes care of all other defects. It really does. As long as we're sincere and we make a vow, whatever we did in the past life that's not good, that we won't do that at all. So, all of these things, purity of heart, we understand these are all a work in progress. Not that we can have expectations that are unrealistic, that we try to purify the heart. Purifying the heart means purifying thoughts, purifying our motives, developing this unselfishness, all of these things, that hand in hand with our spiritual practice. So they work together, each one helps the other. And this sadhana, this of course is the critical thing. We can't simply say that I'll be detached, that I'll have this unselfishness and everything. Unless we do spiritual practice, we won't get rid of this identification with this personality and ego and all of that. We have to do a little bit of that. And then that last great teaching, this idea of unselfishness. Swami Premananda says, if we can only become completely unselfish, we will have no reason to fear. Our selfishness will decrease in proportion to the increase in our devotion to God. See, so it works both ways. Yeah, the more unselfish, the more devotion. The more devotion we have, the more unselfish we are. So it's very beautiful. Our selfishness will decrease in proportion to the increase in our devotion to God. A true devotee will serve all living beings, knowing that it is God who resides within each of them. So devotion to God means also devotion to God dwelling within all beings. This is what Swamiji's great emphasis was. This is the highest form of the greatest manifestation of God, dwelling in all beings, serving all beings, the highest type of devotion. And then finally he quotes this verse 630 from Gita, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na panashyami sachame na panashyati. He who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, to that devotee I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So this is that beautiful idea. Yes, the path of devotion is open to everybody, but the extent to which we prepare the heart is the extent to which really the fruits will will really blossom. The fruits of devotion will really blossom the more that we can practice this purification and have this shraddha and have this loving attitude towards other beings and this unselfishness. So I'll stop here and we can sit quietly for a few minutes.